Inside Red Onion State Prison, America's Supermax of silence. There's a place in America where silence isn't peaceful, it's weaponized. Where a man can serve 10 years without touching another human being. Where the lights never fully turn off. Where the rules are simple. Obey or disappear inside the system's darkest corners. Tonight, we step inside that place. Red Onion State Prison. Once described by inmates as a warehouse for broken men, Red Onion sits deep in the Appalachian Mountains, isolated from the world by design. Some call it America's quietest prison. Others call it a machine built to break the human mind. But the truth? The truth is far worse and far more complicated. Cut to static. This is the story the state never wanted you to hear. Welcome to America's Supermax of silence. Red Onion State Prison opened in 1998, marketed as a solution to America's most violent, uncontrollable inmates. But over the years, it grew into something else, something far more controversial. A labyrinth of isolation units, a pressure cooker of racial tension, a place where inmates claim officers push them to fight each other for entertainment. And yet, outsiders rarely penetrate these walls. Until today, allegations of excessive force, long-term solitary confinement, inmates reporting sensory deprivation. The state denies all wrongdoing. Tonight, we reconstruct the secrets of Red Onion through interviews, leaked letters, whistleblower accounts, and the testimony of former inmates who survived what many call the hardest time in America, the prison in the mountains. To understand Red Onion, you must first understand its location. Wise County, coal country, one of the poorest regions in Virginia. When the mines closed and jobs collapsed, the state needed a new form of industry. They built prisons. Not one, not two, but 4 maximum security facilities within a short drive of each other, like company towns of the past. But instead of coal, the raw material was human beings. Red Onion was designed to be the crown jewel, a supermax built to contain the worst of the worst. Inmates who stab guards, gang shot callers, lifers with nothing to lose. At least that's the official version. But the truth is, hundreds of inmates ended up here for reasons far less dramatic. Disciplinary infractions, gang affiliation without violence, or simply being labeled a threat by prison administrators. Marcus, former inmate, they told me I was too influential. That's why I got transferred. Not because I stabbed anybody, I never did, but because dudes listened to me. At Red Onion, that's enough to get you buried alive. Entering the Supermax. Each year, hundreds of inmates arrive at Red Onion in chains, shackled at the wrists, waist, and ankles. The intake process is designed to strip everything. Clothes, identity, control. Intake officer. Hands on the wall. Feet back. Wider. Wider. Inmates describe the same ritual. Humiliation mixed with fear. Some have been in max prisons before, but nothing prepares them for Red Onion. DR. When they opened that door to the pod, the noise hit me. People screaming, banging, yelling threats. It didn't stop, man. It didn't stop for months. Red Onion's architecture is built for control. 8 by 10 concrete cells. Steel toilet sink combination. Meals passed through a small slot. Recreation in a dog kennel cage. Most inmates spend 23 hours a day in their cell. Some 24. Everything is monitored. Everything is logged. And everything is quiet, except the people losing their minds. The silence. They call it the Supermax of silence, for a reason. Here, silence is not a condition. It is a strategy. It breaks routines. It breaks communication. And eventually it breaks people. But silence isn't the only tactic. Former inmates and staff describe a phenomenon known inside Red Onion as the quiet storm. Long periods where inmates appear calm, controlled, subdued, until suddenly they snap. Why? Because isolation pressures the human mind in ways most people can't even imagine. Dr. Cruz. When you deprive a person of social interaction, daylight, and stimulation, the brain begins to create its own input. Visual hallucinations, auditory hallucinations, paranoia. Some men begin talking to themselves. Others begin talking to things that aren't there. At Red Onion, these symptoms aren't rare. They're expected. I can hear a man 2 cells down arguing with someone who doesn't exist. He does it every night. Sometimes he screams. Sometimes he sobs. No one checks on him. They say he's faking. But I don't think he is. Race, gangs, and the fight program allegations. In 1999 and 2000, a story began to emerge, a story the state of Virginia fiercely denied. Multiple inmates claimed staff at Red Onion encouraged, and sometimes forced, prisoners to fight each other. Not in the yard, not in the hallways, inside their cells. Why? To teach lessons, to punish, or simply for entertainment. They'd put a white dude in with a black dude who they knew had beef, or vice versa. Then they'd walk away. You hear yelling, then banging, then blood leaking under the door. If you didn't defend yourself, the officers would handle you. If you did defend yourself, they'd charge you. A civil rights investigation later confirmed at least one officer admitted to staging fights. Other allegations remained unproven, but dozens of inmates gave strikingly similar accounts. In an environment built on sensory deprivation, sudden violence becomes even more traumatic. It creates a cycle of paranoia and hypervigilance, which the prison then interprets as aggression. Red Onion denies these allegations to this day, but the stories, they keep coming. Surviving the box. Imagine spending years alone with nothing but your thoughts. Imagine eating every meal off a steel toilet because you don't trust anyone not to poison you. Imagine waking up unsure if it's morning or night because there are no windows, just fluorescent lights. This is the box. This is solitary confinement at Red Onion. Some inmates last months. Some years. Some never leave at all. Tyrone, I'd walk in circles. Literally. For hours. Just pacing, talking to myself. If I stopped, it felt like the walls were closing in. I forgot what my own mother's voice sounded like. And yet, some men adapt. Some grow stronger. Some find a way to bend the silence without breaking. How? That's where the next chapter begins. Inside Red Onion State Prison, America's Supermax of silence. The men who run Red Onion. Behind every Supermax prison is a chain of command, a hierarchy built on authority, discipline, and control. And at Red Onion, that hierarchy is everything. Warden, assistant wardens, lieutenants, sergeants, correctional officers. But what makes Red Onion unusual isn't the titles. It's the culture. JR, former CO. You're trained to believe the inmates are the enemy. Not just dangerous, the enemy. You keep your distance. You don't relax. You don't joke. You don't smile. You stay stone cold. If they sense weakness, it's over. Officers at Red Onion are often recruited locally from working-class Appalachian towns struggling with unemployment. The job offers stability, benefits, and a badge. But it also offers something else. Authority over hundreds of violent men with nothing to lose. Many officers describe the job as a pressure cooker. Endless noise, endless tension, endless risk. Each day begins the same way. Strap on the vest. Check your radio. Walk into the silence. What happens next depends on the inmate's mood, the officer's mood, and the unpredictable storm created when both are trapped inside concrete together. The code of inmates. Just like the officers have their culture, the inmates have theirs. A code forged through isolation, violence, and survival. It begins with the basics. 1. Never show fear. 2. Never disrespect another man's space. 3. Never snitch. 4. Never let the silence get to you. Rico, the first week I got there, an older dude slid me a note under the door. It said, "Don't talk to everyone, but don't talk to no one. Keep a balance." I didn't understand that at first, but later I did. At Red Onion, communication is currency. Friendships are rare, alliances fragile, and respect matters more than anything. But respect takes on a different meaning here. It's less about politeness, more about survival. Officers monitor conversations. Whispering can get you punished. Passing notes can get you a charge. So inmates adopt their own systems. Taps on pipes. Coded knocks. Morse-like patterns. Reflected signals using mirrors. Toilet-to-toilet communication, known as plumbing talking. In solitary confinement, a toilet becomes a telephone. Inmates develop friendships through steel and concrete. Some develop rivalries. Some never speak at all. Because here, silence isn't just part of the environment. It's part of the culture. Breaking points. Every inmate at Red Onion has a breaking point. A moment where the silence, the confinement, or the pressure becomes too much. For some, it's the first week. For others, years later. But it always comes. Marlon, you hear footsteps at night, but they're not real. You hear your name being whispered, but no one's there. You start arguing with people who aren't in the room. You can't shut your brain off. Mental health resources exist on paper, but in practice, inmates report long waits, minimal therapy, and heavy reliance on medication. Dr. Cruz. In Supermax prisons, mental health care is often reactive, not preventative. The system waits for a crisis, then responds. But at Red Onion, crises happen often. Inmates punch walls. They cut themselves. They smear messages on their windows. They refuse food until they collapse. And officers, some intervene with compassion, some with force. A Code 13 mental health crisis can result in full extraction team, chemical spray, shield impact, restraint chair, strip cell placement. The line between help and punishment blurs. And in the silence of Red Onion, blurred lines become dangerous. Extraction. One of the most feared events inside any Supermax is a cell extraction. At Red Onion, it's common. When an inmate refuses orders, even minor ones, the extraction team is called. 5 officers, each with a specific role. Shield, arms, legs, cuffs, camera. The process is violent by design. Team leader. Offender. This is your final warning. Comply or force will be used. Some inmates comply immediately. Others resist out of fear, confusion, or sheer desperation. Because when you're locked in a concrete box for months, a simple command can feel like an attack. GR. There were days we did 5, 6, 7 extractions. It becomes routine. But you forget, the guy inside the cell doesn't see it as routine. He sees it as war. Inmates describe being pepper sprayed until they could barely breathe. Officers describe being punched, spat on, or grabbed. Everyone inside Red Onion carries scars, some physical, some invisible. And after the extraction is over, the silence returns. The prison resets. The cycle begins again. The Red Onion School of Survival. To survive Red Onion, inmates create their own rituals, methods developed over years of isolation. They call it the school. It includes 1. Mental exercises, reciting childhood memories, counting cracks in concrete, writing books in their heads. 2. Physical routines, push-ups, burpees, squat sets, hundreds every day. 3. Time mastery, breaking the day into micro-chapters. Breakfast, workout, meditation. Lunch, push-ups again. Dinner, reflection. Tyrone, you don't survive Red Onion by being tough. You survive by building a schedule so tight that the silence can't squeeze in. Some inmates teach themselves law. Some learn languages. Some write letters to strangers, anyone who will write back. Small acts of self-progress become rebellion. Education becomes protest. Routine becomes salvation. Because at Red Onion, time can be your enemy or your only friend when the outside world vanishes. For many inmates, the scariest part of Red Onion isn't the violence or the isolation. It's the slow, painful disappearance of the outside world. Visits are rare. Phone calls limited. Mail heavily screened. Family members stop writing. Friends move on. Children grow up without them. Marcus. One day I called my sister. Number was disconnected. Tried again a month later. Nothing. Found out 2 years later she'd moved out of state. Some men enter Red Onion with support systems. Most lose them with time. The prison becomes their world, their community, their reality. And when the outside world fades, inmates rely even more on routine, memory, the rhythms of silence. But silence has a dark side, one that grows stronger the longer they remain isolated. And that brings us to the next chapter, the one inmates fear the most, The hunger strikes. One of the few forms of protest available to inmates inside a Supermax is the hunger strike. No yelling, no fighting, no confrontation, just a slow, intentional refusal to eat. At Red Onion, hunger strikes have become a form of communication, a message written not with ink, but with starvation. Rico, you don't do a hunger strike to die. You do it because it's the only time the administration looks at you. In a place where silence dominates, hunger is loud. A single inmate refusing meals triggers paperwork, medical checks, and watch lists. 10 inmates refusing meals can shut down an entire unit. But hunger strikes come with danger, both physical and procedural. After 72 hours, inmates face blood pressure monitoring, weight logs, hydration checks, mental health evaluations. After a week, the body begins to tremble. After 2 weeks, organ strain. After 3, things become life-threatening. Some inmates endure until their bones show through their skin. Others collapse long before. But the message is the same. I exist. You will not ignore me. And sometimes the administration listens. Sometimes they don't. Retaliation claims. In every maximum security prison, there are tensions between inmates and staff. But at Red Onion, those tensions come with allegations, serious allegations, retaliation, punishment, targeting. I filed a grievance against an officer. Next week, I lost my rec time for noncompliance. Nothing changed, except the treatment got worse. Many stories follow the same pattern. An inmate complains. An inmate files paperwork. An inmate speaks up. Then suddenly, cell searches increase. Property goes missing. Mail gets delayed. Showers get skipped. Rec time disappears. Officers deny this, of course. But former staff members paint a more complicated picture. GR, look, in a place like Red Onion, everything is about control. If an inmate creates problems, officers circle wagons. Is it retaliation? Depends who you ask. Retaliation is almost impossible to prove, especially in the Supermax, where inmates rarely interact with each other, let alone outside witnesses. But the patterns are clear, and in the silence of Red Onion, patterns matter, because even a small act of retaliation, a denied shower, a missing letter, a skipped meal, can fracture the mind of a man already fighting himself. The mental health collapse units. Every Supermax is a breaking point, a threshold where isolation pushes inmates past sanity. At Red Onion, that threshold leads to what inmates call the collapse units. These aren't official names. They're inmate terms for sections where the most mentally unstable prisoners are housed. Dr. Cruz. These units contain individuals experiencing severe psychiatric symptoms, hallucinations, delusions, self-harm. But the environment is still a Supermax environment. That's the contradiction. Lights stay on. Doors stay locked. Interaction remains limited. Inmates describe hearing constant screaming from these units, men begging, crying, threatening, or bargaining with voices only they can hear. Some inmates smear messages on the wall. Some pace until their legs give out. Some attempt self-harm with anything they can find, a piece of plastic, a torn bedsheet, even their own teeth. And officers, they respond with a mix of compassion, procedure, and force, depending on the shift, the staff, and the severity of the crisis. GR, some guys were too far gone. You'd talk to them, and they'd answer 3 different questions that weren't asked. This place that doesn't help people like that. It manages them. Red Onion was built for control, not healing. And in the collapse units, the difference between those two things becomes painfully clear. Small mercies. Even in a place defined by silence, brutality, and steel, there are moments, tiny, fleeting moments, that keep inmates alive. Small mercies. A letter from a stranger. A joke shouted across a tear. A guard who says good morning. A book passed from cell to cell. A piece of paper folded into a crane. A bird landing on a razor wire. A sunrise seen through a scratched window. Tyrone. One day a guard gave me an extra apple. He didn't have to. He didn't say nothing. Just slid it through the slot. It sounds small, but it kept me going another week. In a world where every interaction is tightly controlled, Kindness becomes an act of rebellion, and some officers, not all, but some, understand that. SD, people think we're all monsters, but a lot of us tried. You'd see a guy losing it, and you just talked him through the door. That's all he needed. These small mercies don't fix the system. They don't end the silence. They don't cure the damage. But they matter deeply, because in Red Onion, hope isn't found in grand gestures. It's found in fragments. The rare moments of hope. Hope inside Red Onion doesn't come easy. And when it does appear, it arrives quietly, like everything else here. Some inmates discover spirituality. Some embrace education. Some write poetry that makes its way into newspapers and advocacy groups. If silence is a prison, then thought is a key. The world forgot me, but I have not forgotten myself. Others fall in love through letters, long-distance relationships built entirely through ink. Others reconnect with family after years of silence. Some even earn the chance to move out of segregation and into step-down programs. Marcus, the day they told me I was moving to general population, I cried. I didn't even cry when I got sentenced. But that day, that felt like freedom. Hope at Red Onion isn't dramatic. It isn't loud. It doesn't look like redemption arcs in Hollywood films. It looks like a man who hasn't touched another person in years finally shaking a counselor's hand. It looks like the first outdoor yard session after months of being locked inside. It looks like a letter that starts with the words, "I've been thinking about you." These moments don't erase the darkness, but they prove something vital. Even in the silence of Red Onion, the human spirit tries to speak. The rules of survival. Inside Red Onion State Prison, every man learns one truth fast. The rules don't exist to protect you. They exist to control you, to pressure you, to study how you break. For some inmates, the rules feel like a twisted game. For others, they're a death sentence with a waiting list. Red Onion's rule book is thicker than some college textbooks. But only 5 rules really matter. 5 rules that shape every hour, every breath, every choice. Never trust a neighbor. Never let a CO think you're weak. Never show emotion. Never leave your cell angry. Never let the silence win. But there's a secret 6th rule, the one no one writes down, yet everyone knows. If you hear something in the night, mind your business. Because at Red Onion, the night shifts aren't quiet. They're suppressed. The sounds that should never be heard are swallowed by concrete. The screams that should wake the staff don't make it past the first wall. The inmates know this. The staff knows this. And the system? The system is built on pretending those nights never happened. Section, a co who broke the code. Meet Officer Raymond Pike, 14-year veteran. Wide shoulders, a smoker's voice, the kind of man who survived off gas station coffee and adrenaline. He once said, "Red Onion changes you. It makes you think silence is safer than the truth." The administration hated that quote, but Pike didn't care, because Pike saw things he couldn't forget. Pike was on duty when Tier B left erupted over a broken shower schedule. 2 inmates refused to cuff up. The code red call was made. A cell extraction team moved in. Pike told investigators the extraction lasted 47 seconds, but the medical report noted 19 fractures. The math didn't add up, and Pike didn't want to be part of a math lesson written in someone else's blood, so he broke the 6th rule. He talked, but talking at Red Onion doesn't lead to justice. It leads to isolation, a kind of social solitary confinement where every officer who once nodded at you now watches you like you're the dangerous one. A month later, Pike resigned. He moved 3 states away. Lives in a cabin now. Sleeps with a shotgun leaning against the wall. He says sometimes he still hears things banging in the night. The echoes from Red Onion that never stop echoing. The man who never slept. In cell A32 was a man the inmates called No Sleep Nate. He wasn't violent. He wasn't loud. He wasn't even known for breaking rules. But he had one condition that Red Onion made worse. He couldn't sleep in silence. Doctors later called it a psychological response to prolonged isolation. But the inmates knew the real story. They said Nate once witnessed something in another prison. Someone disappearing during a nighttime shuffle. someone who was never seen again. And ever since, silence meant danger. So Nate tapped, all night, every night, a pattern, a rhythm, a code. At first, the guards ignored it. Then they warned him. Then they punished him. But the tapping never stopped, because for Nate, sleep was a luxury he'd traded for survival. Then one day, the tapping stopped. Complete silence. Hours of silence. A whole night of silence. The next morning, Nate was gone. His cell was empty. The official report claimed a transfer. No location listed. No paperwork shown. And the inmates, they started tapping his pattern at random hours, not to challenge the rules, but to remind the staff that they remembered. Inside the Blackout Wing, there's a part of Red Onion that the public rarely hears about. A wing with no windows, no natural light, and no surveillance footage that anyone outside the administration has ever seen. They call it the Blackout Wing. Official name, DSEG Overflow. Unofficial name, Where Time Goes to Die. Guards escort inmates here with helmets and shields. Inmates leave the same way, if they leave at all. It's used for behavioral crises, security quarantines, administrative necessities. But everyone knows what it really is. A place where punishment becomes something else. Something darker. Something the human mind wasn't built to survive. Former inmates describe it as a place without days. A floor where the lights buzz but never turn on. A wing where they test how long a man's mind lasts without sound or with too much of it. Because in the Blackout Wing, silence isn't the default. It's the weapon. Some cells have constant noise, fans humming, white noise, and a sort of sound that never ends. Other cells? They're so silent you can hear your heartbeat echo. Some inmates scream just to prove they still exist. Some stop speaking entirely. And some go in and never come out with their sanity intact. A moment of pure fear. There's a story every CO has heard, but none will confirm. A young inmate in the Blackout Wing began shouting at 3 a.m., "He's in my cell. He's in my cell." Guards rushed over. They looked inside. Nothing. Just a trembling man pointing at the corner. They told him to calm down. He refused. He said, "I can hear him breathing." Again the guards checked. Nothing. Then they heard it. A breath. Soft. Low. Not the inmates. The entire tier went silent trying to listen. Another breath. Then a third. The guards opened the door. No one inside. They checked under the bed. Inside the vent. Behind the toilet. Nothing. The incident report never mentioned the breathing. It says inmate experienced auditory hallucinations. But 5 officers quit within the next 2 months. And the inmates? They still whisper about that cell. D14. A place where something breathed back. The silence that never leaves. Red Onion State Prison. A place designed not just to hold men, but to erase them. A place where silence becomes a weapon. Where time folds on itself. And where every echo seems to come from a part of the building that was never meant to exist. Here, stories vanish. Paperwork disappears. Memories blur. And men who once had families, names, identities, become shadows pacing inside cages of concrete and steel. We came to Red Onion searching for answers. But inside these walls, answers are rarer than daylight, rarer than mercy, rarer than truth. What we did find was something else. Evidence of a system built on silence. A silence that doesn't protect society. Only the structure that feeds on it. Some say the worst thing about Red Onion isn't the isolation. It's not the darkness. It's not even the Blackout Wing. It's the feeling that once you enter this place, some part of you never comes back out. And maybe that's why former CO Raymond Pike still hears the banging in his sleep. Maybe that's why inmates whisper Nate's tapping pattern in the middle of the night. Maybe that's why D14 remains a story everyone denies, yet no one forgets. Because Red Onion isn't just a prison. It's a reminder, a warning, a question we still haven't answered. How far is America willing to go in the name of control? And what happens when control becomes something darker than the people we fear? If you found this investigation eye-opening, If you believe stories like this must be told, voices like these must be heard, and shadows like these must be brought to light, don't let this be the end. Like the video, share it with someone who has no idea what really happens behind Supermax walls, and subscribe for more full-length investigations into the prisons America doesn't want you to see. Because as long as places like Red Onion exist, we will keep asking the questions that echo long after the doors slam shut. Thank you for watching. Stay aware, stay curious, and remember, some silences are never empty.